მოგესალმებით მეგობრებო. დღეს ჩვენი სტუმარია ჩვენი წიგნის, რომელსაც ამდენი გადაცემის განმავლობაში წერდით და ვარჩევდით სხვადასხვა სტუმრებთან ერთად, ამ წიგნის ავტორი ბატონი კენ სკულანდი. ჩვენი გადაცემის წაყვანაში გვეხმარებიან ია ჯანდიერი, ჩემი მეგობარი და კამერის უკან დგას ლაშა ჩინჩალაძე. ყავს რამდენიმე დამწრეს, რომელსაც მოგვიანებით გაგაცნობთ. ეხლა სიტყვა გადავცემთ ბატონ კენ სკულანდს, ის თავის შესახებ მოგიყვება, საუბარი რა თქმა უნდა წარიმართება ინგლისურ ენაზე, თქვენ შეგეძლებათ სუბტიტრებით ნახოთ თუ ინგლისური ენა აგესმით. თუ არა და თუ ინგლისური გესმით, მაშინ ძალიან ადვილი იქნება და სასიამოვნო მოსასმენი ბატონი კენი, იმიტომ რომ ძალიან სასიამოვნო მოსაუბრია. Please Ken, say something about yourself and so we will go.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me and my wife here too. We're really very grateful to be here. Well, I'm from the United States. I was born in Colorado, grew up in Arizona, and then I lived some time in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. I then went to I left the government service in Washington, D.C. and decided to go into teaching up in Alaska. And I taught in Alaska and Hawaii and Japan. Throughout this time, I've been very active with kind of spreading the ideas of free markets and individual liberty.
Japan was a very important period of your life, as I know.
Well, yes, I was quite fascinated with the culture there. And I wrote a book called Shogun's Ghost, The Dark Side of Japanese Education, which explains sort of the troubles that young people have in having individuality in the Japanese schools. So even those Japanese schools have a very strong reputation of excellence and so on, I found that there were a lot of serious problems with not allowing individual thinking, and there was a lot of punishment for any independent action. So that was quite a story that I discovered, I think, while living there. But I then came back to Hawaii. And
here is very interesting. Has Japan something very special problems in their education system different from other countries?
Well, most all schools do tend to treat young people as just on a conveyor belt, all learning the same thing. They must get a kind of educational program imposed on them by the government and by the state. But I'm much more of a champion of individual rights, and I think that every person learns in different ways, and they have the right to sort of seek the path of what is valuable to learn. And rather than to be pushed into the same kind of machine, often with the same kind of programming that's insisted upon by the state, I like the path that everybody has, an individual path to their own development and their own thinking that's free of authoritarian control. And all too often schools are just machines to get people to learn obedience. I mean, because they're not really learning by creative thinking, they're often just repeating what they've memorized from an authoritarian classroom. The classroom is not a place of independence and individual thinking. It's a place of authoritarian rule. And their students are not rewarded as they are in the marketplace. Every teacher expects to be paid for their work, but students have to get 12 years of education with nothing more than letter grades and paper stars. Yeah, that's so true. Throughout the world, young people are treated in a very, I think, obedience form of training. And this is a relatively new phenomenon. I think a couple hundred years ago, there were many, many paths towards education and independent development throughout the world. And since
like Finnish method.
Yeah, I think a lot of it originated in Prussia, and the idea that there was one educational path, and it had to be to bring conformity to the state and to bring obedience to the time clock and to regiment people along the same age group. Obedience to the state was often a very, very big, prominent objective of education systems in the last couple hundred years. So I've been teaching at Hawaii Pacific University. Summers then I've been very active with Liberty International, youth liberty camps to learn about free market education around the world in many, many different countries. And my wife has organized conferences and camps in many countries in Europe and in Asia, China, Bali, Morocco, and we've participated in these activities as a family, my daughter as well. And for 10 years, my wife organized these summer camps in China, and and both of us have been in Mongolia for about 5 years. We've been very, very spreading free market ideas and thinking throughout the world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. When did you come first time in Georgia?
Oh, I guess it was around maybe 2004 or 2005. I think we came here to do some summer camps with the new Economic School of Georgia, with Pata Sheshilitsa, whom I'm very good friends with, and I'm really pleased that he and Gia have always been such great hosts to us. And we came for summer camps at Goriono and Batumi and Bakuriani, in the mountains. And so we've done a number of summer camps here, and I love Georgia.
How Pata found you? Because it's a very interesting question. How was it first link between the new economic school and you?
Yeah, good question. I don't remember exactly how it started, but part of it is that through Liberty International, every year we do an annual conference in a different country. Many of them have been in Europe, but we've also been in Latin America, Oceania, in Asia, and all around. And I think he came to some of these conferences and we met up, and he became a fan of this book, The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible, and published an edition here in
yes.
Georgia.
Yeah, we have this edition, first edition of this book.
Yes, that's right.
Yes,
that's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
So when I read this book, I understand that it's very, very important to allow to give possibility to as much people as possible, that they understand easier, because it's hard to read Hayek or Mises or some other books. It's very hard to read, but it's easy. It's very easy to read, and you will understand everything if you mind something.
Yes, I find that you're so right that a lot of the very great thinkers of Austrian economics and free market economics and philosophy have very great works, but they're very narrowly read by a few people. And I was originally asked to write some radio commentaries in Hawaii about economics from my point of view. And there wasn't much interest in just straight commentary about economics. So then I decided to make it into a dialogue, a story, because I had read Gulliver's Travels and The Little Prince and some stories that told very profound philosophical messages in a fun and enjoyable way that made people laugh. It was often filled with satire. And I decided to develop a way of talking about the local issues in economics in this story form. And so then I did this as a 90-second radio spots on an all-news business radio station. And people were very, very responsive. They liked it. And so I thought, well, this is good.
How many listeners this radio had?
Tens of thousands, I think, in Hawaii at the time. It was a business radio station at the time, so it was intended towards the business community.
So it was easier to go through radio, yes?
That's how it started. And then the president of Small Business Hawaii, an organization of small businesses, said that he liked the idea and wanted to put it into a book that could go into the schools. And so we compiled it into a book. He published the first edition in 1989. Since then, well, I took it to the Liberty International conferences in the Czechoslovakia at the time, and Tallinn in Estonia, and people liked it, and they said, this is what we need to get a broader interest in free market ideas in story form. In the Netherlands was the first international edition, Then the second one was in St. Petersburg, Russia, right after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the fall of the Iron Curtain.
At that time was very big interest about free market.
People said, well, what's free markets? In fact, Dmitry Kostigin, who first wanted to publish the book in St. Petersburg, said, please write us an introduction that tells us about what things are, like property and taxes. We don't even have any idea what that is. So I wrote the introduction, which now has become the epilogue in every book, and the animated philosophy of liberty in 46 languages. The first 5,000 copies that were printed in St. Petersburg were by the government publishing house too. Were sold out within months. And there was a very keen interest. It was probably the first free market book published in Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union.
At that time, Russia, not only Russia, Soviet Union was hungry with like this literature. So
yeah, his friends were asking him, how did you get permission from the government to publish this thing about free markets? And he says, they weren't interested in the idea, they just wanted to make some money. And the thing about satire and humor is that it often gets around the censors, the people who don't really understand it. That's why a free market book was published as a story form in Farsi language, in Iran, in Vietnam, in China, in many countries around the world. It was serialized in the Hong Kong Economic Journal in Hong Kong years ago. Now it's I'm pleased to say that it's been translated into 61 languages, 57 of which have been published, and then many of them republished in many further expanded editions. So altogether we've got about 90 editions of the book around the world, plus 4 theatrical productions. 2 of them are musical productions in Slovakia and Kazakhstan, which is both in Kazakh and in Russian, and then also a play that has toured Africa with a cast of 25 in 5 universities of Nigeria and Ghana, and also a play that was produced in Kenya. And right now we're producing a video series that should be a 3-season episode that'll cover the entire book, I think, with video, I hope, animation.
Video animation, I understand it would be very interesting and very popular maybe, but I'd like to know how about musical interpretation, Kazakhstan. You said Kazakhstan and...
That's right, they produced, there it was Ludmila Melnikova. She took, not the whole book, but selected chapters with stories that could relate to elementary school children for television, radio, and theater. And I participated, I was in Astana, in the capital there at the elementary schools, where her cast of about 20 children put on a play from selected chapters from the book. And the audience was filled and they were cheering on. It's a musical production. She produced the music and composed the production.
Was it effective?
Very effective, yeah, very effective, yeah.
Yes, I should think about this too.
Yeah.
Yes, because I understand that if you find suitable music for it, it can be very, very popular.
Yes. And the play that toured Africa was very successful. The play that was produced as a musical production in Slovakia was presented in all the high schools of Slovakia. So I'd say that those productions have been very successful. That's why we think that media is the best way to reach young people with new fresh ideas.
Yes, who, especially if they don't like to read.
Yeah. Reading is sort of...
Yes, read is quite a hard thing because the time goes too quickly now to read anything. So to read something you need to sit somewhere quietly without phone and to find like this time and to find interest in the book. Modern generation.
That's why it's effective to have short chapters. There's 40 chapters in the book,
very important, yes.
and each chapter is only 2 or 3 pages. So students can read the book in a day or two if they want to, but they can read it in just short chapters, and each one was a 90-second radio spot.
Yes.
So it was very carefully crafted to be concise, give the point, add some humor, but each time with a message from great economists like Friedrich Bastiat, the 19th
Yes.
century French
Yes.
economist, or
This-
Milton Friedman.
This humor and idea should come together in their mind.
Yeah, yeah.
To be motivated to read and to understand what they are writing about.
That's right, that's right. Yeah.
So it's very important. Okay, so when did you find yourself that you are for freedom and not for socialism, for example?
Mhm.
Because many people in USA too are for socialism.
Yeah, yeah.
Liberals, they are like socialists.
That's true.
How it goes.
I think my first political memory, and I'm so old now that I'm 73 years old, my first memory of discussing politics with my family was during the Kennedy-Nixon debates. You know, it was the first televised debate between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy in 1960. So it was a long time ago. And
10 years old boy was interesting between.
yeah, well, I was asked by mother, what is this debate about? What do the two parties stand for? And she said, well, one party wants the government to control your life, and the other party wants you to control your own life. Later, I came to the conclusion that both those political parties wanted to control my life. So, but I got in my mind the first thought that really it's either the government is running everyone like a master over slaves, or individuals run their own lives, and the government is there just simply to help them, you know, to be a referee. Mm-hmm. And with that kind of perspective in mind, I started viewing all of my news and economics lessons as I was studying, growing up and learning economics and politics. I looked at it from that perspective. And so I became attracted to the writings of some famous economists, Milton Friedman, Murray Rothbard, Friedrich Hayek, Ludwig von Mises. Ayn Rand, the philosopher, was very influential too. And I developed a very strong appreciation for individual rights, individual liberty. And I believed that that was the best path towards a greater and more prosperous society. And the other path was one of control. And I grew up during the time of the Cold War, and there was this always this contrast. Should the government control everything, or should people control their own lives? So I developed in that path.
One of my friends is saying that collapse of Soviet Union was bad for USA. Why? Because Soviet Union and communist countries was sample how is bad, and we don't need to be similar as they are. Now as they does not exist, not like this sample, so we can make more socialism. Yeah, in USA. I'm surprised, but I think it's somehow true.
That's a good point. When the collapse of the Soviet Union came, I was greatly relieved because we all grew up fearing a nuclear war, where we thought the world would come to an end with a big fight. Then I felt, oh, okay, there's relief now. There is no longer this Cold War. I thought, that battle is over. But you're right, the philosophical battle never ended, because people thought of the United States and the Soviet Union as military combatants, but the real philosophical challenge continued on. And the United States, I think, over many years has continued on with the very path of more and more socialistic control over society. And there were efforts in the old Soviet Union to introduce market forces. So every country is a very mixed world right now, and that has still continued.
Really poor capitalism does not exist, and pure socialism does not exist too. So everyone should understand. People does not. Maybe many people does not understand. It's like this. never existed and never will exist.
But there is a spectrum of more governmental control and less governmental control.
Yeah.
Probably the most governmental control today might be in North Korea, where it's
Yes.
almost as absolute as you could find. And I had great hope for countries like Hong Kong and Singapore, and actually New Zealand too, that had experimented with a less amount of governmental control. But all the time there's a pendulum swinging back and forth of the attitudes. And so one can never just relax and say, we've now appreciated freedom and a free society. There's always a battle with people who want to have control over others. Yeah.
Not possible to reach the situation when you don't need to fight for the freedom.
Yeah, so true. Yeah.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, maybe.
Yeah.
it's so.
Well, but you see the great benefits that have come in Georgia. I mean, you and Gia have grown up in a time where you experienced both worlds.
Yes.
And you can see that this is a much more prosperous world with more freedom, and how much more it can be with even greater freedom. And we see around the world, I use the Economic Freedom of the World Index. That's an index devised by the Fraser Institute in Canada to measure degrees of economic freedom in different countries. And they rank all the countries of the world by degrees of economic freedom. And they show that without a doubt, the countries with the greatest amount of economic freedom have by far the greatest amount of prosperity, the greatest amount of political and civil liberties, the greatest amount of longevity, the greatest health benefits, and the greatest education, the greatest democracy. And the countries with very little economic freedom also have very little wealth, little prosperity, and it hurts those people very much. So the evidence, I think, is very, very strong that freedom has a practical benefit. But the most important thing is that it's ethical.
Here comes the question: why don't they want to understand this? This is so clear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why don't they don't want to understand?
Well, I hate to say that probably one of the drawbacks in every society is that the government is in control of the education. So the government is constantly telling people from the day that they first go to school to the day that they end school that the government is their friend, the government is their guardian and protector, and that they must rely on government for all the good benefits that Big Brother and Big Sister would bring to them.
Like no one wants to understand Reagan's words.
Yeah.
9 words.
That's right, that's right.
So it's...
And it's true that Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, when Jonathan Gullible was being developed, brought a lot of excellent words about the importance of economic freedom. But I have to say that under Ronald Reagan, the government continued to grow, and the debts continued to grow. So his words were brilliant, but sometimes his actions fell short of those words, and that's often the problem in the political arena.
I think when anyone comes there in this chair, he was at the time, he's prisoner of the situation. Mm-hmm. Prisoner. He cannot do different things.
Very true. There are lots of constraints in politics, but that's why I don't rely on politics alone to be the path to a solution. It has to be through ideas, and that's why the books and the theater and the ideas are the most important thing, because the population will be shaped by that.
The ideas should be understood by most of people and should be praised. The government should be praised all the time that not to this but to this. In this case, it is possible that we will reach more freedom step by step.
Yes, that's right.
Otherwise, the bureaucracy always will grow and grow.
That's right. There's always a tendency for governments to grow their power, to try and take greater control over people, because it's sort of in the nature of people to want to expand their control and empire. But individuals have to constantly be pushing back against that thinking that will keep people free. It's a constant battle between those forces. Yeah.
And I think that it's very easy to understand for most of the people that there is no other choice. Either you have more government and less freedom, or you have more freedom and less government.
It's very hard to understand for most of people.
No, it's not.
It's very
hard.
easy, but very hard to understand.
For the people, it's not uneasy to understand why freedom is good. But then they are propagated, that's another thing. They are propagated that if there is more functions in the hands of the government, that's beneficial to you. But you, as I was saying, it's better to keep in your pocket a small paper saying that, oh, more government means more power in their hands and less freedom to you. And when you think about it, oh, maybe it's good to have more functions in the hands of the government, to control the drugs, to control that, or it can be very good maybe, okay, no, that means that I have less freedoms, no. That's what is very important. I think that teaching, educating is very important, but it does not mean that it will be successful. Because on the other side, there is a strongest propaganda coming from media, from internet, from everywhere. There is an attack against individual.
Well, okay.
So Lasha has a question.
Lasha has a question.
I think there are actually many people who wants to be controlled and who does not want any freedom. They say that they want freedom, but they don't want freedom. And that's why basically most of the regimes and communism and Nazism and fascism happen. Because most of the people just want to follow the herd and just do whatever they are told to do. That is the issue, not the freedom itself.
I think it's correct time to show question. To put the question.
People don't know how to handle their own lives.
Yeah.
They want big mommy and daddy.
Like in China, that's the biggest issue, I think. Most of the people just want to do whatever they are told and don't want to do anything. If they want to do something else, they just run away from China entirely.
So I think that we visited today the museum of Ilya Chavchavadze and even read there what Ilya Chavchavadze was thinking about this. There is no freedom without responsibility, and those guys mostly are afraid of responsibility. Not like they don't like freedom, but they think that
certainly this is
if
clear.
I am free, then I need to take responsibility about understanding what is when I go to supermarket and I see butter. Oh, is it my responsibility to check the quality? No. Why not government to take responsibility if this is butter or not? That's the thing. Sometimes also, not sometimes, but I mean, you can also see other side of this. That people are very easy to be convinced that free stuff is good. As Milton Friedman was absolutely correctly saying, free stuff is only in the mousetrap. So you need to understand that nothing is free. Somebody is going to trap you with these free things. But people don't understand that there is a mousetrap. They think, nothing wrong is happening, and they can be regretful maybe after a while that they are in the mousetrap, but they don't understand that such a long process that you are step by step trapped by this. They always prefer to have something today, not tomorrow. But it's still, I believe, outcome of the propaganda. In Georgia, I believe very strongly that even the most strongest supporters of big government and more powers to the government and more money in the hands of the government, if you eliminate all propaganda, what they would do next day? They will start working, nothing else, and accepting anything which is coming from the market and finding that it's not that difficult in reality.
Well,
I believe this is mostly propaganda, and of course, 20th century and now with such powerful means of propaganda, of course, people are doing their best to convince people that more powers and more money in the government hands is, and especially and unfortunately, pandemic did a lot of damage to that also.
here is a question. Here, question is not the thing is it because of propaganda or not. Here, most important thing is these people, many people. I don't know how many percentage, but many of them does not want freedom, refuses freedom because of responsibility. It's clear. But if the people, if the person refuses for freedom, how can we cope with him? To press him to be free?
Well, I think it's perfectly fine for them to choose people to run their lives, and people are all the time looking for companies or families or communities that want to make decisions for them. But the question is, will they allow the next person to run his own life? And that's where the problem is, because they're asking the government not to just control their life with whatever protection or insurance that they want to, but they want to control your life. They want to control everyone's life.
That's the problem, yes.
Yeah.
See, in ancient time, it was like this. We are free people, and we are slaves.
Yeah.
And the slaves never had right to control the free people. Now the people who want to be slave would like to control the free people.
That's the problem of
It's a
democracy.
problem.
The assumption is that by a showing of hands, a majority can then impose its will on every person in the society, and that's the problem. Yeah.
And so, how can it be solved? I cannot mind yet. I think about.
So often people confuse in their mind what they like with what should be the law. Like they say, well, I like to have a higher wage, or I'd like a higher minimum wage, where the law is that everyone has to pay a certain amount. And the assumption is, because that's what I want, then I have to put you in jail if you don't get it or if you don't offer it. And then I ask my students, well, how about should you be allowed to volunteer for work? Oh, yes, I should be allowed to volunteer. Everyone is living with most people are living with a contradiction in mind. They want to be able to volunteer their work, but they want to mandate that the government pay them whatever wage they want. Well, which is it, $0 or $15 an hour? And they live with contradictions because they're not really sufficiently consistent in their own thinking. They're easy to live with contradictions because democracy is a matter of whim. It's not a matter of philosophy. It's just how I feel at the moment, and it's a whim of envy. If you have more money than he has, then they feel they don't like you to have more money than this person, or if you have more money than me, it doesn't seem right. And so democracy is just a tool for exercising envy.
It's another problem already, because when they envy about how this person has more money, because he had many things for the society. He did not steal it. If he stole, what does government do? But if he did not steal, that means that he make bread for other people and he has money.
Yeah.
And some people want that he did only 100 bread and not 100,000. 100,000 is a problem. It should not be done so much. But it's another question. It's a question of understanding in people's mind. But the question of when people who want themselves to be slave enslave you too, that's the problem, biggest problem.
That's right.
By the way, I would like to ask you, for example, what Ayn Rand calls collectivists. If you have heard about, if the collectivists read your books, how did you have any feedback from them?
Well, I often get people who say, how long were you living in my country that you understood the issues? So I plant the story in an island in an undefined
Yes,
time
the same problem we
with
have
that
in Georgia,
purpose,
yes,
so that it
yes.
can apply to anybody. And they see the issue around, the collectivist notion that ideas have to be imposed on everyone. And I think through humor, maybe it's possible to get around the collectivist notion. Sometimes people see, they see how it relates and they didn't recognize it before. So I can't say that I've converted collectivists, but everybody has a collectivist background in one way or another, maybe, but it's separating it out from the force of government. You know, everyone has, you know, maybe they're part of the collective of community of their neighborhood, their school, their family, their company that they work for, but it's separating it out from the state where collectivism has to be imposed on everybody.
Anyway, when I asking I'm about socialists in USA, what did they say about this book?
Well, actually, I think that most of them don't get it. I think humor and satire has, I can't say that I've faced much criticism at all. I mean, no direct
They did
criticism.
not read it, I understand, but maybe someone.
Yeah. And I really haven't had bluntly tell me that this is nonsense. I think each and every episode in there has a logic to it that people accept, and they've been fine with it. And even
Yes,
socialists.
the book is given like this, it's hard not to understand.
Yeah.
It's very hard not to understand.
I think so, yeah. Well, sometimes you do get feedback. Now that you mention it, like for example, I don't, there are certain chapters in there that, the early chapters are mostly economics, the later chapters tend to be more about philosophical issues and dealing with the more controversial things. Like for example, marijuana is dealt with in terms of the chapter on maryberries. I don't preach to people what the policy should be. I simply point out contradictions in public policy. You know, the fact that some things can be made illegal but other things mandatory. Like for example, in the United States, we have the government forces us to subsidize tobacco farmers at the same time that it prohibits you from smoking marijuana.
Yes.
And
One hand subsidize dairy, and another hand to be expensive, and another thing subsidize children's garden, like to be cheap milk or like this. Has let's focus
And some of the things we all appreciate our coffee.
Yes.
And we have coffee breaks that are often mandated by the government. You have to have coffee breaks so that people can get their stimulus. Well, it's a kind of decision that people make about what to consume in their bodies to influence their behavior. Cigarettes or alcohol, those are things that are, in fact, subsidized by the military. The military hands out the cheapest alcohol and cigarettes all around the world at all American military bases. So there is a contradiction here in the sense the way the government treats some things that are banned and other things that are...
It's very hard to understand, but I have read that this kind of position comes from the modern universities in all the world.
Yeah.
What do you say about this education system?
Well, there again, I think most universities are very, very heavily influenced by governmental policy, the money that comes from them. Professors are very often ones who have not had any experience in the marketplace themselves.
And also money comes from the government. It means that every university in the private sector too is more expensive than it should be.
Yeah. So private schools have a very tough time competing with free government schools, and so they lose students and they have a much harder time. I think that it's so ironic. I work at a private university, and I think that it's ironic that if a student is making a choice, they can go to this school, to the government school that is offered totally at taxpayers' expense, or they might have to pay to go to my school. So I have more classes and more of a teaching burden. The other teachers teach half as much and get paid twice as much, and they get twice as many students. So it's not a equal playing field in terms of competition, And it's that kind of competition that has driven a lot of private education out of the marketplace. But there are
why they do to teach in macroeconomics like more socialistic than more free market
yes,
oriented.
absolutely. And because their paycheck comes from the government, they are much more likely and almost universally are rationalizing the government position.
So in this case, in Germany, should not be any university with free market oriented.
Yeah, I think that
they are financed.
There is no
Yeah.
problem.
Huh?
There is no.
No.
Yeah.
So you should not go to Germany to study.
I think, Germans are teaching economics with the American books, of course. But I think everything started with Lord Keynes when he just gave chance to economists to be closer to government, to become statists. Because as Hayek correctly was saying again Hayek, that if the socialists understood economics, they would not be socialists. So either you understand economics and you are not socialist, or you become statist and you have no idea what is economics. But I think he corrupted the economics science himself, because giving them the economic teachers and researchers, scholars who say that government is very important in the economy, you can be expert for the government, or you can be teacher of economics without any problems, etc. This is not only in the economics, but what was for us a really big surprise for the people from the Soviet Union, how much corrupted was the academic system. When we established the Association of Young Economists 33 years ago, we said, let's not apply for academic status in this corrupted system, Soviet academy. And almost nobody applied. Only one lady, she got the PhD from Glasgow, and another guy. But what is very important that we found that West was not that much capitalist as we thought before. And when we abandoned socialism, and when we were absolutely critical and thinking that communism was wrong, in Georgia, for instance, many told us that, you should have more regulations, more taxes, more planning, and we can think how much planning the West has. It's in the education, it's in the healthcare, it's in the pensions, it's in almost every sector. There is central planning. And also the money is used for central planning and monetary system. It was really surprising after many years. And then what is these books? What are these books about macroeconomics? This is about how to plan your economy and how to influence with the government decisions on the economy and the decisions of ordinary people.
Look at what politics is. Everybody accepts that it's wrong to steal, wrong to lie, wrong to kill, but they all rationalize it when it's done by government. Then it's okay to lie, to steal, to kill, when it's rationalized by government. So I would think that people who enjoy the use of those tools have found a great rationalization for their gaining of power through these tools.
Sometimes I think somehow in modern situation, maybe last 100 years, society became that it's okay to steal from someone. Yes, mostly if it is inflation, they stole money from my pocket, and it's okay, it's no problem. And for society, for most of the people, it's not immoral
Yeah.
Why? I cannot understand.
I know. It seems like we've become so accustomed to inflation. Over the last 100 years, we've had nothing but inflation, and so we assume it's inevitable. Just like a volcano, there's nothing you can do about it. But it's not inevitable. For hundreds of years, thousands of years before that, inflation didn't exist as long as there was a gold standard. And
Yes.
people became very accustomed to a standard value of their purchasing power. And therefore they had motive to save, motive to earn, money, motive to invest. And all of that's been completely turned upside down and shattered by inflation.
Yes,
The hidden,
especially after
Yeah.
1971.
yeah, but I would say it even started earlier in the United States with the creation of the central bank,
Yes.
the Federal Reserve System.
1913.
That's
Yes.
right. Because then they tremendously expanded the money supply to fight the war. And there's another thing. I would say that governments would probably never be fighting wars if they couldn't print money. Because to fight a war, they would actually tax the people directly to pay for the war, which is a very expensive thing. And most people would say, can't we find some way to avoid this war if they had to pay for it directly? So inflation, by printing money to pay for every war,
Not possible.
is the easiest way to pay for any war. And this has been true throughout history. Kings and emperors have always thought of a way to pay for wars without taxing the people directly
Yes,
to it.
and we need to find a way how to fight against it.
Recently, I found accidentally almost one book, which is really more than 100 years old, just translated in 1920s, and surprisingly published by Soviet government of the time in Georgia. The author was somebody, Professor Eber from Germany, and this book is about science of finance, and very interestingly that he was writing that at the time the economists they thought that public debt and the monetary system not based on the commodity was kind of shameful, immoral thing. 100 years ago, and that's why I said who allowed this economists to prove the opposite. This was Lord Keynes, who told them that okay, now it's not like he gathered the economists and told them that now you can be statist, but
Print the
before
money,
that-
print the money.
yeah, he said that printing of money is not immoral thing. That means that stealing from the people and robbing the people is not immoral. This
Actually-
is exactly it. And he was saying, for instance, in that book that public debt it means not only like you are generating public debt and next generations will be paying for that, but also that it's immoral because that generation, their abilities and capacities will be shrunk because of that they need to pay for that, and something like that. So then there was again Lord Keynes. Real understanding of economics was under doubt by Friedrich Hayek again. But this is again about that either you are an economist and you have your morals, not to say incorrect things, but or you become government serf and you are always saying what government likes to hear. This is the thing. But there is a kind of ongoing debate at least in the US about modern monetary policy, and I was commenting on this that this modern way of stealing money and robbing the people, because monetary policy is nothing else than robbing the people without, robbing is of course without permission, and they call this beautiful, not so easy to understand wording, and people can think, oh, modern monetary policy. Sounds very complex
You
thing.
could call it
I don't
counterfeiting.
understand, but then you tell them that it's about that they print more money, which makes your money less valuable. It's how they are robbing you. Oh, really? I didn't know about it. But this is exactly what it. So any monetary policy means robbing the people, nothing else.
So no government likes gold standard.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now I have question about the cat. I have
Yeah.
question that
Right.
I remember. So the cat, not the dog, and yellow, not other color. Why?
Yeah. Well, the cat was a creation. You know,
I have read the comment.
the cat's name is Mises,
Yes.
because the cat, of course, likes to chase mice. So Jonathan calls him Mises, but it's a reference to Ludwig von Mises,
Yes,
his
it's clear.
fellow traveler.
Yes, but
famous-
not only. Why not dog?
Ah.
Why and why is it yellow? Is it in case or special?
I hadn't really thought about
Really?
why yellow, but I did think about a cat is so much more independent than a dog. A dog is
Yes.
just an obedient.
Yes. The dog enslaves to its master.
Yeah.
And
The cat
is
is so much
a
independent.
more free animal.
Yeah.
And I thought so. I understand so. And why yellow?
Well, you make me think of the gold when I think of yellow. That's much more appropriate.
Yes. When I read, when I read it, I thought because of cat is independent and gold is yellow. So it is combined and he made this personage in this tale. But when I read the comment, I was surprised. It's not right in this book. It's another one. So,
We'll have to put that in there. Then that's good as a comment.
yes. So, but it's important thing that people understand that gold saves our pockets from robbing from the government, and independence is our freedom is our most important thing. What cats have itself, they are free animals, much freer than
Now, I think
others.
gold is a better alternative than fiat money, but my preference is choice, allowing the consumer to choose. And maybe it'll be Bitcoin, maybe it'll be gold, maybe it'll be, but choice
certain.
is the greatest incentive for the producers of money to be careful.
Yes, in this section, what Gay was saying, immoral is not printing money, but force to the people to use
That's
especially
right.
the money they
Yeah.
print.
Yeah, exactly.
So then they should okay. It's not my problem if they print so much as they want, but I will not use their money. I will use another one, and that's finished.
That's right.
But
That's right.
if they press me to use that money, especially only that money, so I'm robbed.
Exactly. Yeah.
So last question is about Alyssa. When Alyssa comes to Jonathan.
Well, Alyssa is actually a reference to Ayn Rand. That was her original Russian name. And
Yes, Alyssa Rosenbaum.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
That's right. And I wanted to weave her name into the story because she was such a profound influence on my philosophical development that I thought it appropriate that she be in there. And of course, my wife cautioned me against making it too much of a romantic attachment, but a little bit of romance in a story is always energizing. And Jonathan had a motive to meet her and discuss with her throughout the story.
Yes, would give some more interest to read.
Yeah.
Yes.
Plus, there can be a future still in mind. Maybe she'll yet visit him on his island.
Yes, if you are going to write this book, I'd like to make its translation myself.
Yeah. Good.
I will do myself because it's very interesting for me.
I'm really grateful to you for taking up this project because I'm very, very appreciative of all that you've been doing on this.
Can I ask you one question? There is a chance. So, how do you think are American mostly individualistic or mostly collectivist? Americans.
Yeah, I'd like to be optimistic about it. Of course, it varies so much by the person. Politicians are all collectivists, and the population, probably the reason that there are people who are political parties, they tend to be more collectivist, but the independents are even greater in number than those in political parties, and they tend to be individualists, I think. So maybe there's hope yet that that the independence will break the spell of political control. Is that
So
okay?
individualistic or collective?
He did
Well,
not understand the
It's,
answer.
it's not
Yeah,
one or
yes.
the other. It has to be both.
Actually,
Yeah,
it's
it
not
is.
clear. So he is sure that me too. I'm sure that we are mostly individual people, individualistic, but no research. We have no research.
Yeah,
about
yeah,
it,
it's
so
a
we
subject.
I mean, I believe that Americans are more individualistic, and itself the US was created because people wanted more freedom and they went to the US and found new places, etc.
You make-
And I mean, there are more collectivist things in any European constitution than in the American one.
That's why you mentioned a very important factor, the self-selective process of migration. Those who left Europe to go to America were seeking individual freedom. I think that's the nature of migrants. People who are comfortable and collective are much more likely to stay at home where it's safe. Independent-minded people are much more likely to take the adventure, the risk of going to a new place that's a risk and a hazard potentially to take on great adventure. So I think migration is a very valuable self-selective process.
The other side of this, if Americans are mostly entrepreneurial or they like to have jobs. Because in Europe, I remember there was such a study that it was absolutely opposite. Now, after so many strange policies in the US, it could be changed also. I think that many people accepted free stuff in the US as well. But I think 20 years ago, if you asked Europeans and Americans, you could find opposite results. That most of the Americans wanted their business and less to be employed by somebody. And in Europe, it was upside down, like more for jobs and less business oriented.
Yeah.
But what is good there, they cannot really understand many things about this. And there are hundreds of stupid statements there, hundreds in our constitution, which is destroying the freedoms of individuals. And then they have also in their thing, oh, we've forgotten about that, let's put there. This is the Georgian constitutional rule. And it is kind of continuation of European continental way of making constitutions. That's why I'm saying that maybe Americans are more individualistic and the government cannot fight that easier, and they are more entrepreneurial and they cannot treat their entrepreneurial feelings and attitudes that easy that happens in France or Germany or many other European nations. What I always think that economists are easier to understand.
So we are about to finish. I think you should say some words if you want to say something.
Oh, just that I'm extremely grateful.
Well, what I forgot to ask you, maybe something.
No, just that I'm really hopeful that you'll have great success with this new publication. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of response you have here. And of course, we'll have ongoing relationship for many years to come in promoting free markets, free and individual rights.
Yes, we should promote in Georgia and not only in Georgia, around the
Yes,
world,
that's right.
what your book does. And
Yeah.
I hope we will continue.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Really appreciate
Thank
you
you.
having me. Yeah.
Thanks.
Aloha.
Aloha. Aloha.
Mahalo.
Mahalo, yeah.